Welcome to Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight. I'm Pete Wright, and I am here with, it seems like old friend now, Sean Coleman,
Yep.
BA Insight, Chief Customer Officer. You're back on the show. It's about time.
I'm back. Yes, glad to be here.
Today you're telling us the story of the Hateful Eight. With all due respect to Quentin Tarantino, did you pick that title because Samuel L. Jackson is in everything?
I did.
And there's really just a risk he'll show up here.
That's right. One of these, that's like, the hidden risk number 9.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson comes around.
Listen, we are telling the story of the big 8 portal risks that every CIO needs to know. How did you go about building this list?
Yeah, I think it's a good story, right? We talked to lots of different CIOs and around the different organizations. I mean, I think that this podcast we're really kind of focusing in on the legal side, so I did want to put that out there. We do look at this from a legal point of view, but really this is something that any CIO could look at. But you look at these intranets and portals and enterprise search or whatever you want to call it, and everyone, we always spend all the time talking about all the reasons that you should do it, and they are right. They're great reasons you should do it, but we don't want to leave out the risks that you could have, right? So there are the kind of the right ways to do these, and there are the wrong way. And certainly, from our perspective, we like to cover both sides. So we'd like to say, if you're already doing this, or if you're thinking about doing it from a risk perspective, what do you need to think about when you're talking to vendors? What questions do you need to ask them? When your internal team is telling you, yes, we went live with this, what things do you need to make sure we're covered off? And I think, from a risk perspective, and everybody knows from hacks and all the different data breaches and things like that, you've really got to have a control of this. This is access to your data, and it's access to a lot of data. So knowing that it was done right is key, and we hope that this Hateful Eight of things that you want to check out is helpful to people.
Well, and that brings us to risk number 1, which is ironically not directly related to data and breaches and hacks. It's consultants. How are consultants a risk for you?
Well, I don't want to come off as anti-consultant, because I think that there are really good use cases for consultants and consultant shops and people that do design and planning and things like that. But the real risk here is to understand and really, really kind of have the full picture of how they're going to fit into your overall strategy, right? Consultants are great for bringing in, new ideas, for bringing in, new skill sets and instilling that in your people. But they're also great in taking something that they've done before and trying to see how much mileage they could get out of it and kind of repeat it. So a lot of what we see is and I guess I'll use the word of bias. Right. So we see in the marketplace a lot of the same kind of approaches. Right. So someone says, hey, it worked for this firm. This exact same thing's going to work for you. And then we're going to go and apply that over here. And it should be this technology and it should be these. Right. So the real risk there is that from a consultancy perspective, they're bringing in ideas that certainly have worked, but maybe they're biased against new approaches. They're biased against innovation, or they're biased against cloud technologies, or things that they don't understand, or things that they've not worked in. Or they have a little bit of bias into certain products, right? So they have a relationship with the product company they've worked with, or they're going to make recommendations. So I think the big thing for a CIO to think about is what role do the consultants play, right? How am I judging their advice against the advice of my internal team? Because remember, your internal team knows the problems, they know your organization, and they know what needs to be solved. The consultant will come in and know kind of what they've seen in general, and it's bridging the gap between what generally has worked to what's going to work specifically for your organization. And if there's one thing that we know, every firm, every company we worked with is different, and one solution that applied for somebody may not resonate or may not work. And you may do all this work and realize that there was just a cultural difference that you have that your people knew about and the consultants didn't know and didn't have a way to impact that. So, understand where they're getting the recommendations from, understand what kind of things they're doing to really get out there in the market and do some innovation, understand that kind of stuff. I mean, we're a product company, right? Our interest is to sell you product. The way we sell product is by innovation and creating new features. So we're constantly talking to everyone and building new features. Our goal isn't to come in and establish a long-term consulting relationship with you, where we park a couple of guys or a couple of girls on your site for months on end and do reports. That's not what we're after. That can be valuable at certain times, but I would say that any good CIO is going to look at that and understand where it fits and how it fits, and look at the whole picture, and you'll avoid that risk of kind of just following someone's playbook. Right? Don't let them come in and call the same plays and then run the exact same game, because it's not going to have the same output all the time.
This leads us directly into risk number 2, customization rather than product. I feel like you were sort of setting the stage for this one in talking about BA Insight as a product company. How does that model impact risk number 2?
I think the big risk here is, and it's really understanding, when you're gonna make the dive into what we would call a customization versus a product. And I think this is kind of an age-old debate. But what's key is knowing, because these things get really complicated, right? You're rolling out a enterprise search, you're rolling out a portal. You're bringing all this data together, and you realize, you know what? I need to incorporate data from this system over here, and your team or the consultant you got involved in says, oh, yeah, we can do that. We'll take care of that. But what you find out later, that it was something that they kind of hand built or they hand tooled, and then you go and a new SharePoint cumulative updates come out and it breaks that. Or now you want to go to Office 365 and it can't because it's tied to this, right? So understanding where in your stack have you built custom software versus product, right? Because when there's a product that you buy, that vendor becomes accountable to you for all of those things. They become accountable to you for testing new releases. They become accountable for you for making it work on other platforms, right? And you have that voice in there, and they're motivated to do that based on the agreement or the support and maintenance or the subscription that you have with them. When you deal with custom software, it's basically fire and forget a lot of times. People write it, it works, they move on, that consultant goes somewhere else. You find out that, wait, this is broken now. No one remembers who did it. The documentation isn't so good. There's no phone number you can call and ask them for support, any of that. So these little customizations kind of eke their way into these projects. Right? So you may start with, we're doing a large portal implementation. We're going to use mostly software. We're going to not do a lot of customization, but little by little, because the platforms make it easy, these little customizations pop up. So from a CIO's perspective, understanding how you're managing to that, how your project is structured, and how those risks are being identified and tracked are going to let you know and give you that comfort level of your overall platform on when, not saying that customization isn't ever right. Sometimes it is right. But you want to make that conscious choice and know when you're doing it and what risks you're taking when you are doing it.
Now, when it comes to risk number 3, you mentioned cloud strategies, and the parenthetical here is technology that can stand in your way.
Yeah, and this is a big one, right? We talk to a lot of firms around, cloud software and where they're going, where people are going with the cloud. I mean, all the different things, whether it's cloud infrastructure like your Amazon Web Services or your Microsoft Azure, things like that. But there's also, Office 365, there's Google Apps and Gmail and all the different things, all that Google for Business stuff that's going on. Or all of these are cloud providers, Salesforce.com, Box, any of these places that you're dealing with it. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be the first one to say that that's where people are going. That's kind of the future. Everything's heading that way, and you're going to decide when that makes sense for you. And when the right time to pull that trigger is. Maybe it's not now, maybe it's 2 years from now, right? But what you're doing implementations like this, like a portal, and you're going to find that in a year, you're going to want to take part of that and you're going to want to move it into Office 365. You're going to go into an Exchange Online, or you're going to go into a SharePoint Online, or you're going to take your document management system from iManage, you're going to move to NetDocs, right? NetDocs is all cloud. What you don't want to have happen at that point in time is have picked a technology stack that doesn't work in that environment. That all of a sudden now, because you want the flexibility to change your document management system, or you want the flexibility to change your email host, or you want the flexibility to change where your SharePoint infrastructure is, that because your portal application or your enterprise search application doesn't work in that environment, now you have another problem. So we're telling pretty much everyone we talk to, all the CIOs that we deal with, that understanding the cloud integration strategy that the companies that you're working with has and what their cloud roadmap are very key. Not only understand it from the level of do they have one, but at what level are they integrating, right? All of these cloud platforms, be it Salesforce.com, Box, NetDocs, they all have structured APIs. They have development life cycles. They have recommendations on how to integrate with them. And it behooves the CIO to understand, are you following those models or are you doing different models, right? For instance, are you integrating your application into the app framework of SharePoint, or are you basically embedding in external web pages in something we call an iframe, which is really kind of it's a little bit of a cheat, right? I'm going to take my application that I have, I'm just going to make it show up in there. I'm not really going to integrate it, right? And that in some cases that may be a fine strategy. But what that tells you is that there's not an investment being made into that cloud architecture, into that cloud infrastructure that's going to give you that peace of mind that as that cloud infrastructure matures and grows and adds features, that the implementations that you've done are going to continue to grow that way. So those are questions you need to understand and really have asked people and really understand from the cloud perspective.
These are the same kind of shortcuts that start to eat away and sort of erode your strategy that we're talking about in risk number 2, right? The same kind of thinking goes into customizations. Generally, it might be a shortcut. Those shortcuts add up, right? We're talking about data security in risk number 4. Now, this is where I thought you were going to start with.
Yeah, I mean, certainly data security is a big one, but I think, the reason we have it as number 4 is because, all of the other things around the strategy and how you're going to build things, you got to kind of get that all in place and then make sure that from a security perspective, you're not opening any holes, right? So you think about, your portals are going to bring lots of data together. Your intranet or your enterprise search, you're going to increase effectiveness, but you could also open up some data security issues if it's not done correctly, right? So the questions you're looking for here, how are the back-end systems that are being accessed, how are they getting that data? How is it going to go and populate the data that people need from them? Is it going to the source database, or is it using a structured API? If it's going to the source database, how is it doing that? Is it doing it through queries that someone wrote? Is it doing it through a documented procedure? And those access protocols that are being used to get in there, how and where are they secured? So obviously it's got to talk to these different systems. It's going to have access credentials to do that. What is the storage mechanism and security around that access, right? So your document management system may be the most secured application in the world, but if your search application talks to it and has access to that data, and there's a security breach there's an automatic hole to get them into your other systems. So this is huge to understand. What process are you using to get to those systems, and what processes are you using to secure the connections that are being made? Are we using secure encryption? Are we using tunnels? Are we using VPNs? How are we doing that? How are we protecting those credentials? Are we following IT best practice, right? Those are questions that you have to know, and you don't want to sacrifice your data security to make the deployment easier. Someone may say, oh, it's really easy if I just, put these passwords in this file here and then I can read it and it'll be fine because it's on the server and it's protected. But, is it? And you need to understand those things and ask those questions and really understand, as we're building this portal or search application, is data security at top of mind, not only in the data that we're bringing in, but in the protection of the configurations that are being done.
How does this relate to data protection? Your risk number 5, right? We're sort of building on this point. Should we call Yahoo?
No, certainly not. No, I mean, I'm sure they've solved that. I mean, there's really smart people out there doing data protection.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You want to find the experts in this field? You're going to call Yahoo right now today.
Right. Yeah, they've learned a lot.
They got it.
But yeah. To build on the security, that we were talking about in the previous risk, I mean, the data protection, you've now decided that you're going to let this core system kind of access your data and bring those in, and so there's, you've got it now a hole into there, where data can be extracted, and you want to really make sure that the queries, the database team, all the people that kind of do your data protection layer are informed and involved in the process. Right. What we've seen especially in the legal market, is that there's a lot of really common systems, and access into those systems is pretty known, and that IT teams a lot of times share a lot of duties, and that's great. But what you don't want to do is through that process recognize that, what I'm going to do is my designer who's doing my UI work, he's going to work in the same interface that's pulling the data that the database person has. So now that the guy who's doing the layout, he's in the exact same tool, running queries, pulling data from your backend systems, which pulls that security out of your DB architecture team and opens up a little bit of a security hole there. So understand whatever tools you're using, if they allow you to really segment those duties and segment that responsibility, which is actually going to tie right into our next risk, which is about separation of duties. But on data protection specifically, you have opened up holes into here to get this data. Understand how that is being protected, understand the queries that are going against it, and how you can get control of that into your database team. Are they managed through that, or now are you taking that data access and putting it into some other system that may be difficult to get to? The database team doesn't know about it. Maybe it's custom. So are there new holes that maybe your existing security procedures aren't equipped to handle? If there are, understand them, document them, make them part of your process.
Well, this does lead right into risk number 6, separation of duties. How does this relate to, and your recommendation for separation of duties when you're looking at some of these external pressures toward more strict separation of functions in development and IT?
Yeah, I think this is a huge point. And I think more and more firms that we talk to are going to deal with this. Their clients, right, understand that from their data is being entrusted in your hands. That data is finding its way into documents that you're filing for them, and now you're a steward of that data, right? So anymore, the idea of an IT team that shares a lot of duties, and sometimes I do the backups, and sometimes I do the data, and sometimes I do the UI. That's a little bit of a thing of the past, because they're going to be asking for a lot of these best practices, ISO certifications, right? We hear a lot of people talking about ISO 27001 and how what the strict practices that come along with that with data access, and separation of duties is a big part of it. So understanding the database layer, who has access to that, who controls those passwords, the application layer, who has access to that, are they the same people? Are there procedures for when you access a system with a certain account, that account has rights only to do certain things, or are you accessing the account as kind of a super admin? So understanding that, and understanding, can I, even if I don't do it today, can I, if I am asked, separate these duties efficiently? Can I separate access to the data from access to the UI, from access to the application? And then I can have a different person doing data backups, I can have a different person doing patching, all these kind of things, because that's the kind of questions, that's the kind of IT audit that likely at some point in time in your future you're going to have to go through if you haven't already. And if you find out that you picked a piece of technology that doesn't allow that separation, now you're in trouble, right? Because now you've got technology that you have to replace to get certified, which is going to take a lot longer, and your clients are going to be pressing you for it. So make the right decisions up front. Understand who can grow into the right security procedures and the right security structures that will support that level of audit when it comes to you.
So risk number 7 talks about proprietary interfaces, and again, this feels reminiscent of some of the challenges we have up in risk number 2, risk number 3, the shortcuts that you may be tempted to take that may burn you later, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's kind of key, and really in the IT infrastructure world, IT software support, anything like that, there always starts out with niche players. They fit a need, and then they grow, and that need becomes more centralized. So understanding where your vendors play in that space, and what level of kind of configuration control, what basis they have, on what they've built. Is it built on a platform that is readily understood, right? So we talk a lot about SharePoint. The SharePoint platform in itself has methods and methodologies for developing applications, for delivering components, for doing UI. Those are tried and true. lots of consulting companies come out there and know them. So having a vendor that knows how to work with them and that their software fits that model gives you flexibility in, I can pretty much go to any SharePoint consultant shop in the world, tell them I need some UI tweaks done, and they'll be able to help me. Now, if there's an alternate proprietary model, you're tied to that company or their couple of consultants that may exist. So now you need a very simple UI change. There's not very many people you can call. Maybe they got a backlog. Maybe they can't get to you for 6 months, right? Maybe the consultant's not available, right? So you've shortened the pool of ability to help and flexibility that you have if you go with a solution that's not built on these kind of tried and true standards. And it doesn't have to be SharePoint. The Salesforce.com has a great model for building portals. Amazon Web Services for deploying infrastructure, right? There's lots of articles, lots of information, lots of help out there on those platforms. And so going with those platforms gives you some peace of mind and some security around the fact that when you do need help, it's going to be readily available for you. And that's really what the proprietary interfaces are out. Understand where they exist. Understand if the choice that you're making ties you into a very specific skill set or a very specific list of people, and understand that in the future that may become an issue for flexibility and for changes that you want to make.
Your final risk, usage and user satisfaction. Seems like everything else that we've been talking about all boils down to this.
Absolutely. Right. So all the stuff we talked about, that your data security, your data protection, all of it has to be right. But you have to at the same time understand that as long as my users also need to use it and they need to be satisfied with it. And how do I understand that? Here's all of the questions that you need to ask, for risk, 1 through 7. But the real, other risk is I've done all this and then nobody uses it, or they don't like it, or they hate it, right? They can't find anything on it. So the last risk, and that's why we put it last, is can you get the answer to the questions that you have about how people are using it, what they like about it, what things they're able to find, how does it help them, how does it deliver on my ROI? And we've talked a lot about this in previous podcasts around analytics and things like that. So it's not only understanding your infrastructure and how it's built, but understanding how have we instrumented our system to know how our usage is growing, what our users are using, right? What works well for them, what doesn't work well for them, and having an easy way to plot that and look at it. I mean, think of it from a marketing perspective, right? Amazon.com knows exactly how many people bought things from them yesterday, the day before, last year, this year compared to last year. They own their analytics and they understand them. This platform that you deliver, this portal, this intranet is a very similar thing. Your customers are your employees, and their usage patterns tell you what you need to do with the system, tells you if your investment has been good, tells me if you need to do some things to improve on that investment. But ultimately, you got to know the usage, you got to know what's working, you got to know if they're satisfied, because all the other stuff doesn't matter if the system doesn't get used.
So sum it up for us in terms of your list of the big things CIOs need to be aware of and where they might go for more information, particularly for our legal CIOs that are listening to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a great set of other podcasts. We've got a great set of information on our BAinsight.com legal page that you can get to right off of our main page. But kind of to sum it all up, right, we started off the Hateful Eight. We're movie fans. But if you really want to boil it down, what things do I need to do? I think we went over a lot of the questions that you need to ask, which are really around how's my data being protected? Do we have any risks in terms of certifications or things that we may need to get? Are consultants leading us in the right direction, right? Are we using proprietary or customizations or things that are going to get us in trouble? And are we making our users happy, right? Those kind of core questions are the things that really the project should likely be judged by. So if you think about it from a scorecard perspective, if you created a scorecard on your intranet, here's 8 things that you really should ask and have the answers to know if you've got are you passing or are you failing?
Outstanding. Good man, Sean. Thank you for bringing these points to the show today. We sure appreciate your time. taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Always happy to do it, Pete.
And for everybody listening, thank you so much for your time and attention. We'll put all the appropriate links to more resources, ways to connect with Sean on LinkedIn and connect with BA Insight to get your questions answered, all right in the show notes. You swipe over to the show notes in your podcast app of choice, and you can click right through from there. It's the best way to find us. Thank you so much for downloading and listening to the show, and we'll catch you next time right here on Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.